What's up, Flannelverse, and of course the DK Army. Thank you for joining us here for Thursday Night Football. We've got the Cowboys at the Giants. DK and myself, we're going to break it down position by position: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, defense, kickers. DK is going to leave us a little bit early. I think before the end of the show, I will probably do the last segment on my own, playing with some lineup builds, taking any questions you have at the end. So DK, first of all, how are you doing? I saw that you are you teamed up with the Odd Shopper. You're doing the Odd Shopper Tales thing. How's life?
Yeah, no, life's going good. I had a lot of fun doing the show last time with you, so I was like, why not run it back? But yeah, now I have all my content over on Odd Shopper, OS Tales. So excited to be working with them, and it's a really nice platform. And yeah, I'm ready to talk some Thursday night football. I think it's a pretty interesting showdown slate with a few edges. So excited to chat about it.
I'm glad to hear you say that you think that there are a few edges. I'm struggling with what direction I want to go with this slate. Okay. I mean, I obviously agree with you. You can obviously find edges, I think, on any slate, probably. But I've been struggling a little bit with the direction I want to take this thing. And of course, I don't really have to narrow it down that much because I play a lot more lineups than you do. Because you are a single entry guy, you really need to focus on like the specific type of lineup you think is going to have the most EV for you. Are you just playing one lineup tonight? Are you playing a few? What's your plan tonight?
Yeah, just one lineup. I'll have probably enough. I haven't actually. Good. Thanks for reminding me. I didn't enter a high stakes contest, but one in like the big contest, and then one in like a smaller field, higher stakes contest.
Okay, so you are doing a mix of tournament types, and that's a good reminder. I always have to remember at least once per show, tell people, because I say some things that people are like, that is crazy. Why would you ever do that? And it's because I play almost exclusively like the largest field GPPs. They're contests that typically have at least tens of thousands, usually hundreds of thousands of people in them. So sometimes when I'm saying things that maybe sound like counterintuitive, it's because I'm trying to get unique in huge fields. I'm trying to avoid the most duplicated lineups, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the reason we might have like different approaches to what we're doing, in part because DK playing, focusing primarily, I think, on the smaller field stuff, of course, playing in the large field as well. But we have kind of different focuses in what we're doing in these contests. But generally, the information that we provide, a lot of it is going to be applicable to regardless of what you're playing. Even if you're playing cash, a lot of the information about usage and stuff like that is going to be applicable for everybody. So just wanted to give that little heads up before we start. We're playing. I'm playing the large field GPPs. A lot of my analysis is geared toward those large field GPPs. DK playing some smaller stuff here. We can, of course, start with the quarterbacks. I think we'll just go, as I said, position by position. Quarterbacks to me is generally the least interesting position to talk about from a like, do you like this quarterback perspective? Because it kind of affects your entire build. So I guess it's interesting in a way, in the sense that when we talk about the quarterbacks, we can kind of talk about like how you're trying to do things in general. You're doing Giant stacks, Cowboy stacks, that kind of stuff. But the plays themselves, like quarterbacks almost always project pretty well. We have two quarterbacks that project pretty well tonight. DK, how are you feeling about Dak Prescott and Danny Dimes tonight?
Yeah, so once again, I think, DraftKings on this trend where I think they continue to, underprice quarterbacks. So obviously like both quarterbacks a good amount, 10-4 for Dak, 9-4 for Daniel Jones. Dak's getting a little bit more ownership, and I think that makes sense. I think he's the safer quarterback. And we've seen, Dak have to air it out a ton. I don't know if we'll get that type of game script again for the Cowboys, but yeah, like the upside in Dak a good amount. And then the positive here of Daniel Jones is, a little bit less ownership, and he does have that rushing upside. We really haven't seen the, big Daniel Jones game on the ground, but we know that is in the range of outcomes. Like last year, we saw like a few games where Daniel Jones went for like 50 plus yards in the ground. So we know that is possible. So yeah, definitely like both quarterbacks. It's going to be tough to, prioritize both, just because there's a lot of spin ups that you want in your lineup. But yeah, I think both look pretty good. And I guess if you made me pick between the two right now, I would give the edge to Dak, even though he's getting a little bit more ownership. But I think both are still a bit underpriced here.
Yeah, I think both pretty strong plays in general, not getting a crazy amount of ownership. And I guess I can pull up the ownership here. So I go back and forth now between this is projections from fantasy points, but I also like they don't have ownership projections there. So I like to pull those up on Roto Grinders, see what the ownership looks like. And we'll start at captain. We have Dak Prescott coming in at 12% projected ownership. Daniel Jones at 10% projected ownership. That feels like a nice number on Dak. If 12% is where he comes in at captain ownership, I think I would like that number on Dak. I would want to come over the field on that. Daniel Jones, this number surprises me a little bit that it is as high as 10. I would have thought he would be closer to the like Aaron Rodgers that we had last week, where he came in at 5%. Don't love that number quite as much. I do kind of like the idea of, and again, this is where like we talk about quarterbacks, they kind of set you up like the entire build when you do a quarterback at captain. I don't hate the idea of doing a full Giants onslaught. I think that's going to be a big part of my build tonight. Do Danny Dimes at captain, and then throw in obviously Malik Neighbors, but then Wan'Dale Robinson, and then maybe one of Darius Slayton or Theo Johnson is kind of a build that I sort of like tonight. How do you feel about doing a full-on Giant stack with Daniel Jones at captain?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the positive there is it's going to be really low owned. I think if people are kind of building that onslaught build, they're going to lean towards the Cowboys. But I mean, we've seen Dallas really struggle, so I don't mind it. Again, you're going to be unique, and I think if I'm building that Giants onslaught lineup, I think it makes sense to go Jones in the captain, just because again his rushing upside plus he's got some talent out wide too. So yeah, I like that idea. Again, it'll be super low owned. Obviously, it's not likely to happen or to hit, but I do think it is in the range outcomes tonight for sure.
Yeah, I think it's mostly it's not the likeliest. It's just for large field GPPs. Like I think it's probably likelier than the amount of people who are going to play it. So I think the payoff when it hits would be really good. So yeah, it's an interesting build. At least not going to be something that I'm playing in half of my lineups, but I think I'll be overweight to what the field is doing in that kind of scenario. And I don't even think you need necessarily the Giants to crush the Cowboys in that scenario because the prices are so much better than the Cowboys. The good Cowboys are much more expensive. You have CeeDee Lamb, you have Jake Ferguson, 7,000. Dak's pretty expensive. So just given the pricing of the Cowboys, you could have the Giants onslaught could be the winning lineup even without the Giants actually dominating the game. This is we should call out Slayton is active tonight, Dallas. So that was the big inactive news that we were waiting on. Wanted to get that before we started. We do have Darius Slayton active tonight, so we will talk about that more when we get to receivers. But we're keeping it trying to keep it kind of short and sweet with these positions. The only other thing I want to hit on is stacking wise. Daniel Jones, I think, still has the type of rushing upside that I would be okay playing him naked in the flex. Want to have him paired with probably at least one pass catcher when I have him in the captain spot. Generally, preferably multiple, I think. I know these kind of considerations maybe don't matter as much in the smaller fields because you don't have to hit the absolute nuts. But in the large field where you really do need to hit pretty close to the nuts. Would you agree with me that Daniel Jones, he probably can play naked? I don't think I would play Dak naked because he just doesn't run quite enough to get there without his pass catchers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think in the flex, I'm fine playing Daniel Jones naked just because, again, that rushing upside, we haven't really seen the big game on the ground, but we know that is possible. We saw it last year a few times. So totally fine playing him, just naked without any receivers in the flex spot.
Yeah, last year we saw it a few times, and 2 years ago he rushed for over 700 yards. That one shocked me when I was looking through his season longs. Like I knew he was a pretty good runner. I did not remember he had a 700-yard rushing season just 2 years ago. So certainly has that in his bag. Okay. Outside of, and I guess I can read off the flex ownership here real quick. We have Dak Prescott at 47.5%, Daniel Jones at 42% flex ownership. To give you kind of an idea, a sense of how much the field is playing them. Feels about right to me. We can move on to running backs. Kind of feel like the other positions outside of quarterback are more interesting on this slate, so maybe need to spend a little bit more time on it. Devin Singletary, the best projection on the slate of the running backs. He's only 8,200 facing a Cowboys defense that has been pretty bad against the run all year, giving up like 4.7 yards per carry. How do you feel about Devin Singletary in general, and how do you feel about him as a captain play tonight?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty safe play. I was pretty tilted about it. I played Singletary week 1 when he was like really low owned and he didn't do much. And they actually like kind of spread out the snaps. But in the next 2 weeks, he had really good games. I was pretty tilted about that one. But yeah, he's still pretty clearly the RB1 here and involved in the passing game, which is a positive. DraftKings being full point PPR. So I think I agree. I think he is your safest running back play. Now, I do also think it is in the range outcomes that Tyrone Tracy maybe plays a little bit more. I think as the season goes on, he's going to slowly, eat away at those Singletary snaps, and maybe it's like 50-50, or even Tracy's the lead back at the end of the season. I think it's definitely possible. So will that happen tonight? I don't know. Maybe you see a little bit more of Tracy, but looking at the other running backs on the board, the Cowboys kind of uncertainty there with Dowdle and Zeke. We'll talk about that. And Singletary is coming in at a reasonable price point, right? In the 8K range, pretty easy to get to. So I think he's a pretty safe play. Don't mind him the captain, maybe going a little bit over on the captain, but yeah, I think overall pretty solid option.
Yeah, it seems to be the if you're going to attack one area of the field for the Cowboys, it seems like their running game, running defense is the worst. So seems like that would be the best place to attack if you want to get some Giants in there. I mean, I'm playing a lot of Giants across my lineups, but Singletary, yeah, it looks pretty good. You sort of alluded to it. The Tyrone Tracy seemed to come on a little bit more in week 3. We saw, he kind of played sparingly. The first couple weeks did have 5 carries in week 3, up to 29% snap share there. He ran 11 routes, so that was his season high. Saw a couple targets. He had run 10 and got 3 targets in week 1 as well, but kind of promising to see him up to a 29% snap share in week 3. Singletary actually took a step back, saw his lowest snap share in week 3, and that was a competitive game that the Giants actually beat Cleveland somehow. So they involved Tyrone Tracy even in a competitive game. And you alluded to it, like we could see him take on more of that kind of passing game work. Do you have interest in Tyrone Tracy in kind of getting ahead of that potential role?
Yeah, no, I like him a lot as a tournament play. Again, I think he's a super talented back. Watching him a little bit in the preseason, I know he got a little bit banged up, but I actually think he's like a really good running back. So I think it's possible he could take on more snaps tonight. Again, not getting a ton of ownership, depending on where you look. I don't know, hovering around a little less than 10%. So I think there's other guys in that range. I think Slayton will get a lot more ownership, kind of in that, like, if you're going to try to punt someone. But yeah, I do like Tracy because, again, I think he's a super talented running back. He's a good pass catcher, and I think it's definitely possible he could play a little bit more tonight.
Yeah, Tracy, a receiver for part of his college career, should be an elite pass catching running back. Cool to see him get involved last week. I kind of like it as a contrarian showdown play as well, and we can look at the ownership on. I don't think I'm playing him in the captain at all. The ownership would have to be really, really low for me to consider it. But in the flex, we have Tyrone Tracy coming in at 10%, just 10% seems about right for 2,800. I kind of like that number. I could see myself getting a little bit on top of 10% there. Seems like a pretty good bet there. We'll get back to other running backs. So let's get through the Giants first. Do we have any other? I guess Eric Gray would be the only other Giants running back to consider. I'm not going there at all. What would you think about any Eric Gray?
No, yeah, only played a couple snaps last week. Would just rather take the shot on Tracy.
Yeah. Adam Ridner says, cool, you guys join forces. Yeah, love doing content with DK. Happy to be doing this one with him. And I guess this is a good time to give the little shout out. If you guys have not already, like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channels. DK has a pretty big YouTube channel already, but it's a great one. He does a lot of great work there. You can subscribe there. If you're on my channel and you're not already subscribed there, you can find the link in the description of the video. Also, please do subscribe to my channel. I have a pretty small new channel trying to grow it. And it has been going better during the DFS season. So I really appreciate you guys supporting me throughout the DFS season. Of course, I have not updated my banner since this morning. I think I've added 30 or so subscribers since then, but trying to get to 3,000 subscribers here within the next week or so. So if you would subscribe, I would totally appreciate that. And of course, like the videos, comment, all of that is very helpful for the YouTube algorithm. So appreciate all of your support. And this is also a good time for me to update. We're not on quarterbacks anymore. I'm still getting used to my changing the what we're talking about here down to running backs. We've talked about the Giants now. Now the Cowboys, kind of interesting as well, maybe more interesting than the Giants, because it's really hard to anticipate what they're going to do with the running backs in Dallas. You can see here, Dowdle is the best projected. He's 200 more than Zeke, projecting here for about 5 fantasy points better than Zeke. I want to see if that is the same on Roto-Grinders, but I think this is one where the projection is maybe sort of difficult to read. Like I don't think anybody has a particularly great read on what the projection should be, what the kind of volume is going to look like. Dowdle 11.57 on Roto-Grinders. We have Zeke at just 7.6, so a little bit higher here. What is your general read on the running back situation there in Dallas?
Yeah. So my read is I think Dowdle is pretty clearly the RB1 right now. Now I know the last couple of games were, really bad game script. The Cowboys fell behind, but Zeke didn't even play a snap until the third series last game. So that leads me to believe that Dowdle is still pretty clearly the RB1 there. And again, the snaps have been ticking down on Zeke as well. So right now, I mean, Dowdle is getting more ownership, but it's looking like 2-1 or so, depending on where you look. And I don't think that gap is wide enough for me to want to go to Zeke over Dowdle. So I think, Dowdle's 6'4", Zeke is 6'2". I think Dowdle's a much safer play, a little bit more involved in the passing game. If you take a look at the snaps last week, again, it was awful game script, but Dowdle 37 snaps, 21 routes, Zeke 15 snaps, 9 routes. I think the positive with Zeke is he's got the touchdown upside. I think, if they get close to the red zone or close to the goal line, I should say, like Zeke is probably getting those short yardage carries. So that is the one positive with Zeke. But I think if this was like Dowdle was like 3 or 4x the ownership of Zeke, that's where I'd start considering to play Zeke over him. But right now, only about 2x, Dowdle more popular than Zeke. So I think I give the edge to him. And then we also have to talk about Hunter Lemke, kind of like the running back / fullback. He was in a lot of the passing downs, 2-minute drill. So I think he's another kind of interesting option, not getting a ton of ownership there at $800. But yeah, this could go a lot of different ways. Like I think if Dowdle struggles early, it's definitely possible they could just go to Zeke more. And if Dallas is playing from ahead, which they should be in this game, Zeke still does have a ceiling. But yeah, right now for me, I think I do give the edge to for Dowdle over Zeke.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% that Dowdle is he's the 1A at the very least. I guess the bigger question for me at this point is it an RB1 and RB2 situation, or is it a 1A and 1B situation? Yeah. And that's where it becomes more difficult to kind of parse, as you can see here. Last week, Zeke just had only played 14 snaps. Some people had it as 15. I don't know. It's a small discrepancy there. But Mike McCarthy asked about that. I think you kind of alluded to it. He said, we need more rushing attempts. First of all, he keeps saying they need more rushing attempts. But then about Zeke, he says, Zeke only getting 15 carries was just a product of the type of game we were in. We were behind and talking about no huddle and 2-minute offense in the middle of the third quarter. I think he's been solid. He hasn't been given a lot of looks. It's hard to be critical of anybody when he's not having opportunities with the ball in his hand. Of course, all of this from the Coach Speak Index Discord. Highly recommend it to anybody who's not already signed up there. Really easy to find good information there. So that quote kind of made me think maybe I don't want to read too much into last week, but as you say, didn't come in until the third series. Rico Dowdle pretty clearly playing ahead of him so far, and seems like he would be the better bet to potentially be a lead back. I think Zeke just is not that good anymore. So I think we're on the same page. It really does, though, come down to, as you said, the ownership, and it's really hard to predict where the ownership is going to be. Currently, a lot of sites have it pretty close. Dowdle coming in here on RotoGrinders is 26.5%. Zeke at just 20, down at 20.65. At those numbers, I think Zeke would be basically a full fade for me. It's just like bet against touchdowns, bet against 2 touchdowns, basically, because I don't think 1 touchdown necessarily gets it. Of course, I said the same thing about Braylon Allen, and he nearly got there on much more usage than expected. But I think that I would just lean into Rico Dowdle if this ownership holds. I'm not really that confident that it will. So I might throw in a little bit of Zeke just in case he does end up coming in really low owned. But Deeg says he thinks Dowdle is going to be north of 30. That's kind of my read too. I feel like everybody wants Dowdle to be a thing. I want Dowdle to be a thing. I'll just say it. I want Dowdle to be just take the lead back role. But if it were going to be a bigger split, then I would start thinking, all right, maybe we get different with Zeke. But as of current ownership projections, and this is probably the last ownership projections we get, I think I'm with you. Dowdle the better bet there. You mentioned Lupke. Last week ran. Where is this? 14 routes last week, 25.5% route participation, 3 targets last week. Still doesn't have a carry on the year. But as you said, he's a fullback. Certainly you would think if they wanted to make somebody their goal line back, Lupke would make a lot of sense to be a guy to get some goal line looks. Hasn't happened yet this year. He had 1 touchdown at the goal line last year. It was in an extreme blowout. So I don't know if that is telling about anything, but he was successful getting into the end zone from the 1 or 2 yard line last year. At least some possibility he becomes like not just involved in the passing game. If he's the passing game and goal line back, I would have some interest there in Lupke, but certainly nothing we can count on. You already talked about him. Do you have any interest in Deuce Vaughn?
No, I think that's getting a little bit too thin for me. So yeah, I think he only played a few snaps last week too. I want to say 5 snaps, 3 routes. I think I'd rather take the shot on Lupke. And again, it's not like he's very popular. So if I'm going to completely punt it, I think I'll go with the fullback there.
Yep, and we are on the same page there. Lupke down at, where's Lupke ownership? He's still very basically zero ownership is what Roto-Grinders has him at. So yeah, I'll take some shots on Lupke there. Same page as you. Any other running backs we need to discuss? I don't believe so.
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. We talked about not playing any Eric Gray. So to tie a bow on it, who are your favorite at the running back position? Who, if you're just going to play like 1 or 2 running backs, who would you be most inclined to play?
Yeah, so I think right now, like your most optimal running back plays would be Singletary and Rico Dowdle. And then if you want to get different in tournaments, I think taking a shot on Tyrone Tracy is something I do like, just because, again, I think it's possible you could see a little bit more snaps. Might not be tonight, maybe it's later on in the season, but my lean is that he'll start eating away at Singletary sooner rather than later.
Yep. So we are on the same page. Those 3, and then of course also Hunter Lupke, as we talked about. I think those are the 4 that I have the most interest in playing. Sounds like we are on the same page with those 4 of running backs. Let's move on. Talk about some wide receivers.
Is my mic not coming in clearly?
I'm hearing you just fine.
Okay.
Oh, there's somebody here that says you're. Is that who you're responding to?
Yeah, that's why. Because I have it set up for like my mic right now, so it's, I don't know.
Yeah, you sound totally fine to me, so I don't know. Maybe he means me. Do you mean me, Slick Willie? I don't know. Am I coming through? How do I sound to you?
You sound fine to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Another person says you're quiet. I don't know. Maybe I'm super loud. Maybe I'll move my mic away and you guys can turn your.
I can also move my mic closer. I don't know.
Okay. Ship Happens asks, Neil, should you leave money on the table? I play the largest field GPPs. I always leave some money on the table. It's generally not a question for me of should I leave money on the table. It's more a question of how much money should I leave on the table in the largest field GPPs with hundreds. You can make good lineups without leaving money on the table. And I've sort of kicked myself a couple times last year where I felt like I got everything right and didn't come close to winning any money because the lineup that won followed all the other rules, but just didn't leave any salary on the table. So maybe if you're okay with chopping, 150 ways, don't worry about leaving money on the table, because if you just follow the general construction rules that are best, you're going to win more often by not leaving salary on the table. As far as like the EV of your lineups, you're generally going to you can benefit in Showdown by leaving salary on the table. So it's kind of are you okay with winning $10,000 when you win, or do you want to try to win hundreds of thousands of dollars when you win and take a slight hit to your odds of winning? It's kind of a personal preference there. I typically leave a little bit of salary on the table. All right. Wide receivers. So we are up to fantasy points now has Malik Neighbors and CeeDee Lamb. Same exact projection, 19.7 projection for these two around the industry. Got to refresh this. Around the industry, though, I think CeeDee Lamb generally projected a little bit better. Let's start with the Cowboys side of the game. CeeDee Lamb typically most places has the highest projection on the slate, projected for 18.5% captain ownership at flex, 44% ownership on CeeDee Lamb. Is that a number that you're okay with? Is that something you think you would try to get a little bit lower on in large field GPPs? How do you feel about the CeeDee Lamb play?
What is he currently projected for ownership wise on fantasy points?
So fantasy points doesn't do ownership projections, but on Roto-Grinders it is 44% in the flex, 18% in the captain spot.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm fine going overweight to that. I think this is a good spot for CeeDee to bounce back. Obviously, he kind of had an outlier bad game last time out. I'm not super worried about it. I think it's a really good matchup as well. Not really scared of any of the Giants defensive backs. So I think we could see a big CeeDee Lamb game here. We haven't really seen that explosion game yet. We know like he can go for like 30 plus fantasy points. So reasonable ownership, not crazy, not too low, but I think right now I would lean going overweight to CeeDee Lamb, and he's getting a lot of ownership in the captain too. But I think it makes sense. Like he has a massive ceiling. We'll talk about Neighbors too, has a pretty high ceiling. But yeah, like the two main wide receivers a lot. Obviously, I don't think that's a super contrarian take. And I think right now I would lean getting overweight to CD.
So you like, I guess that is, I usually go team by team, but that is kind of a good talking point of you prefer CD over Malik Neighbors because it's difficult to play both of them in the same lineup. That would be your preference.
I think right now I slightly lean CD. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they come in at the same ownership or not. I think it'll come in pretty similar. But I'm just going to give the edge to CD Lamb right now. I'm a little bit more confident with Dak Prescott as a quarterback as opposed to Daniel Jones.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. We've got two cornerbacks out for the Giants as well, so nice spot for CD. Again, Adoree Jackson and who's the other? They have two starting cornerbacks who are out, so kind of an average secondary as it was, and now it's going to be pretty weak with expected to be pretty weak with two backup cornerbacks coming in for the Giants. So that makes sense to like CD quite a bit, and the ownership not all that different, at least in the flex. We have CD at 44%, Malik Neighbors at 43% in the flex, and then in the captain spot we have CD at 18%, Malik Neighbors at 14%. Do you feel the same way at captain? I mean, Neighbors is, you can see you're 1,500 cheaper in the captain spot than CD Lamb and coming in at lower ownership. Do you still just want to eat the higher price tag and ownership with CD?
Yeah, I think it's not that wide of a gap, so I think I would still give the edge to CD. But obviously, again, I'm a big Malik Neighbors guy. I think he's one of the better wide receivers in the league, even right now. So
already,
it's a tough one. It says you got to make some really tough calls. The quarterback's underpriced. Obviously, the two main wide receivers. We got some good plays in the mid range too. But right now, I think I would slightly prefer CD.
Okay, and that's I think you can't go wrong. I think CD, that's totally reasonable take to just go heavier on CD there. Let's move down on some of these other Dallas receivers. So we have Cooks and Tolbert. To me, are the most interesting because Cooks is $1,000 more. They both have really, really similar roles. Really hard to differentiate between the two of them. We have, and I guess ownership is one way to do that. So let's take a look at flex ownership. Cooks coming in at 18% projected ownership, Tolbert at 17. Even they're not all that different. Do you see anything that makes you, like one of these guys better than the other, or do you like both of them? How do you feel about these Dallas secondary receivers?
Pretty indifferent on both of them. I know Cooks has kind of been underperforming a little bit, but he's still out there a ton. Tolbert, a little bit cheaper. Maybe a little bit easier to get to since it's $1,000 cheaper. Again, they, like you said, similar roles. They both ran the same amount of routes last game. They both ran 51 of the 64 routes. So, no real strong takes here. Ownership's pretty similar. And with that being said, since Tolbert's slightly cheaper, maybe just prefer him, but that's not like a super strong take. I think they're both solid plays. Both have a ceiling, but I'm not going to go out of my way to play either of them either.
Yep, we are on the same page. I do like the ownership numbers on both of them. It's tough because writing about the slate, it's like they're not great. They don't have great projections. They don't have great point per dollar projections. They're not low enough owned that I can really call them contrarian plays, at least how I define it. But the ownership numbers I think are pretty fair. We see Cooks in week 3, 82% rep participation, 6 targets. That's a pretty solid role for Cooks. That was a tough game with Baltimore. Jalen Tolbert, very similar in week 3, 82%, 5 targets that week. Both just very involved. Had an 8 target game in week 2 for Tolbert. Both pretty clearly the starters behind CD Lamb. So I do kind of like the ownership against banged up secondary. I think I'm probably going to be above weight to both of them, but I'd be lying if I tried to tell you that I like one significantly more than the other. I think that they're both just pretty strong plays, and it's kind of hard to get a read on which one is better. Any other Dallas receivers that you're interested in? Not tight ends, but like Kevontae Turpin, any interest there? Jalen Brooks?
No, and again, they are getting some ownership. So I think there's some other guys on the Giants side at a similar price point I'd much rather get to. So Brooks, Turpin, I'm okay just kind of Xing those guys out. I know they've been playing a little bit. You saw Turpin run 15 routes last game. You saw Brooks run 13 routes, but that's just because, again, Dallas had a ton of plays. They had 80 total plays, 64 total routes. So I think in a normal kind of competitive game, those guys aren't going to see the field as much. So We'll talk about some Giants guys I would rather get to at a similar price point. So not much interest in either of those, like wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 for Dallas.
Yep, same page. I like the 2 and 3. I think are coming in at low enough ownership. I'll just lean into those. Probably get above weight to the field there rather than going to the really low owned Dallas pieces that I just don't think have as good of roles. You alluded to the Giants receivers being maybe a little bit more interesting as far as the cheap guys go. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson is just a target monster, and I can pull up his participation so far this year. It has been pretty consistently pretty great on the year. Wan'Dale Robinson, his route participation has actually been third on the team, just 69.5% route participation, but still has 23 targets on the year, 21.9%. Target share is second on the team. Really good usage so far. He's 4,800, so not crazy, not crazy expensive. The ownership, let me pull up if that has changed at all, because it has been pretty reasonable as well. 30%. So I think that is a little bit higher than it was earlier in the day, but still pretty reasonable. I don't know. I like him. How do you feel about Wan'Dale Robinson tonight?
Yeah, no, I think he's probably one of the better value plays on the board. I've been a Wan'Dale fan for a while now. He's a short ADOT guy, but he's going to get a lot of looks. He's going to get a lot of targets. He's pretty clearly their wide receiver 2, and he also has the upside to get some carries, right? You can get some end arounds. So I just think he's underpriced here. 12 targets week 1, 8 targets week 2. We know DraftKings is a full point PPR, which is a pretty big boost for a guy like Robinson, who again is going to get that short ADOT stuff. So I think he's one of the better values on the board. I think his correct price should probably be like close to that 6K mark. So I'm pretty high on Robinson, and I think he is even playable in the captain as well. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite values right now.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing he had the one game where he had, I think, 11 targets. I mean, if he can get that kind of targeting in a game, he's certainly viable. Captain, just say he catches 8 of them, scores a touchdown. Suddenly you are looking really, really strong there for Wan'Dale Robinson. 11 targets in week 1, just 4 in week 2, but then back up to 8 in week 3. Really, really solid role there. Darius Slayton has been the pretty clear wide receiver 3 so far. He has a hurt thumb that he was, questionable up until inactives came out just a little bit ago, right when we started the show. But he is active tonight. Are you concerned at all about the thumb? Is that going to scare you away at all? I think he actually lost some route participation with the thumb injury last week. It was up at 83% in week 2. Saw 4 targets in each of the first 2 games, 2 in the third game. Hasn't done a whole lot. It's been kind of a down year for Darius Slayton, but that kind of usage, that kind of rep participation interests me. I don't know how much interest do you have in 3,200 Darius Slayton?
Yeah, no, I think he's a pretty safe play. We can talk about Theo Johnson a little bit once we get to tight ends. I would say he's kind of a similar option. He's out there a ton, not really doing a ton right now, but at least he's out there running routes, right? And he's 3.2K, so he doesn't need to do a ton to pay off the salary. So we mentioned like he's in the same price range as like the wide receiver 4 and 5 for Dallas. Like just give me Slayton over those guys all day long. While I do prefer Robinson for a little bit more, I still think I'm fine settling on Slayton if you can't afford Robinson. Again, he's going to run a majority of the routes. I'm not really worried about the thumb either. He was limited participant practice all week. So not super worried about that. And I still think Slayton's like a decent receiver. I don't think he's like amazing. So 4 and 2 targets over the last 3 weeks. Again, you don't need a ton to pay off the salary. I do think he has a little more upside than what he's shown so far. So another, in my opinion, pretty safe play.
Yeah, I like Slayton. I don't know that safe is necessarily the word that I would use for him, because he has not done all that much. But I get what you're saying. He's very much a reasonable play with his volume. Certainly could have a big game. Question about Isaiah Hodgins playing. Has Isaiah Hodgins played at all this year? I don't think Isaiah Hodgins is on my radar. I don't know if he was on the inactives list. I didn't see anything. Oh, my camera did go away again. Isaiah Hodgins is at the very least not playable, I guess, whether he's active or not, or at least I'm not planning on playing any. The other big question that comes with Slayton is Jalen Hyatt has taken a pretty clear backseat to Slayton. He has 2 targets on the year with an ADOT of 31 yards down the field, average depth of target of 31 yards down the field. So it does feel like somebody that could be, could have an opportunity or two to potentially, break the slate. If he scores a touchdown, gets a 60-yard bomb at his price tag, Jalen Hyatt is going to look really great, but he could also just be an absolute zero in your lineup. He's $600. Obviously, probably, I'm guessing not a small field GPP play for you, but in large field GPPs, do you think that it's worth some shots on Jalen Hyatt? Do you see any kind of a boost for Darius Slayton coming in with a thumb injury?
No, yeah, I think it's pretty hard for me to get to Hyatt right now. Obviously, I think if Slayton was out, he would be one of the better values. One other thing to note, Hodgins was on the practice squad, so that's why they mentioned it. He did not get elevated, so I think he was a candidate to get elevated from the practice squad if Slayton got ruled out. But yeah, right now Hyatt, I think it's pretty tough to get to. Only ran 6 routes last week, so it's just like a dart throw in large field tournaments. If I was building 150 lineups, I would probably have a little bit, but in single entry, small field stuff, there's just better values for a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Hyatt is the type of player. If I were playing 150 lineups, which I'm not tonight, I would probably try to get to 5 or 6%. He's projected for 3%. I would try to get a little bit above where the field is at on that, just because he does have that clear slate breaking upside with one single touch, but he's also just a real risk for zero. So not somebody that I'm going to play if I'm playing just one lineup, but if you're playing 150, I think Hyatt is a good bet to get overweight to the field on. Any other receivers for the Giants? I don't think so. Do you see anybody?
Nope. I think that's it.
All right. Tight ends. And I know you need to get out of here in 5 or 6 minutes here. We can start with Jake Ferguson, the kind of easy one, the Dallas tight ends. Jake Ferguson projects for 12.2 fantasy points at 7,000. Really strong role, actually leads the Cowboys in target share so far this year. He did miss a game, so CeeDee Lamb has more targets. I don't expect that to hold, that he will lead the team in target share. But what is your level of interest in Jake Ferguson at 7,000?
Yeah, he's another guy that I'm kind of indifferent on. Obviously, has that touchdown upside, 11 targets last week, which is pretty good to see. Ownership's not crazy on him, so totally fine landing on him. I think he, again, has the ceiling, not like super overpriced or underpriced, just kind of fine with it. So he's someone that would be kind of a filler play for me. I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to play him, but if he lands in my lineup, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in it. What is the ownership there? Because it was pretty low earlier in the day, and I kind of like that. It's sub 30%. I think I see myself going overweight to 30% on Jake Ferguson. So he is somebody that I think I anticipate being a little bit overweight to. In the captain spot, we have Ferguson coming in at 5.5%. That seems reasonable to me. I think I'll be probably close with the field on that. Probably not taking a huge stand on Ferguson. But he's involved enough that I do have interest there. What about any interest in Luke Schoonmaker?
Probably not. I mean, he did run 16 routes last week. He had a good game that Ferguson missed, and he didn't actually play as much as everyone thought. He had 6 catches on 6 targets, $1,000. I mean, he would be a pretty similar play to Hyatt, probably a little bit better of a play than Hyatt, but still kind of tough for me as a single entry player to get to a guy like Schumacher.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I did not realize he only ran 14 routes, 30% route participation in that game, had 6 targets despite that. That is pretty funny. And then was just down to 26%. So barely took a haircut there in terms of route participation in week 3, but only saw 2 targets. He's to me just your typical backup tight end, not going to play a lot. If he happens to catch a touchdown, you're going to wish you had him. But I don't think the analysis gets that much deeper than that. I don't think that he has much upside in terms of playing time. It's just a matter of $1,000. We'll get some playing time. If he scores a touchdown, he could be good. The other side of the game, I think, is more interesting because Theo Johnson doesn't project all that well. He's 2,400. You alluded to him as a play earlier, so I'll let you do the breakdown of Theo Johnson. What's your level of interest there?
Yeah, I kind of like Theo Johnson. He's been out there a good amount. He's not really known as a pass catcher, even going back to college. He didn't put up insane numbers in college. But he's still out there a ton. And at this price point, again, you don't need a ton to pay out that salary. He played 57 to 71 snaps, ran 33 of the 42 routes. Also, Daniel Jones, I believe, missed him in the end zone. 3 targets last week, 4 targets in week 1. 2.4K. I think he's a pretty good play. And I think the, box score watchers will just kind of see he's not doing much, you completely avoid him, but he's got a pretty secure role right now. So I do like Theo Johnson as a contrarian play. Don't think I'd play him in the captain, but I like him as a flex play right now because I don't think a lot of the field is going to look to him as a value, and I think he's a pretty good play.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Theo Johnson this week. I let you do the analysis first, so I wanted to hear your stuff, unbiased by my opinion. But I am going to lean into it a little bit by Theo Johnson. I think I'm with you. I don't love him as a captain play. I don't know that he's going to put up a big enough score to really be the captain you need, unless all of the other the studs go off. But Theo Johnson at 13% ownership feels pretty nice to me for a guy who had 79.5 route participation in week 3. Like you said, he has not been super involved in the offense, a total of 6 targets so far this year, but that kind of route participation, they have schemed stuff up for him a little bit. I've seen some plays where they were, trying to get him involved in the offense, and he's 6'6", like just seems like a guy who should be an end zone target, and is a starting tight end. So maybe he just, still getting those rookie tight end feet under him, and I think better days could be ahead for Theo Johnson. So I think I like him even a little bit better than you do, or I guess you like him as well. So we're on the same page with Theo Johnson being a pretty strong GPP play. Clearly, it still has a very low floor, 6 targets on the year, even with all that route participation. That's the other side. If you want to play that angle, well, he's out there. What's the upside? He's already not getting targeted. I just think that he has opportunities to get more targets since he's already out there. So yeah, fan of Theo Johnson as a play. How about any Bellinger?
Just a little bit as a kind of dart throw as well. Again, Theo, like I said, hasn't done a ton, so is it possible that maybe Bellinger eats into some of the routes? I think it's possible. But right now, it's not like Theo's getting much ownership. So like if this is a situation where Theo is getting a lot of ownership, then I'll be, I think, more willing to take the shot in Bellinger and hope something kind of weird happens. But I mean, Theo's not getting ownership, so I'm just fine playing him and not really considering Bellinger much outside of like a large field dart throw.
I know you need to get going, DK. Do you want to give any other thoughts before you head out?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid showdown slate. I mean, I know we didn't really get to talk about the defenses or the kickers. I think both are fine. Obviously, Aubrey's been amazing for Dallas, so he's probably the slightly better kicker. But I think he will come into more ownership. I think if I had to play defense on this slate, I would give the edge to the Cowboys, even though they are a little bit more pricey. But yeah, I think it should be a decent showdown slate. And yeah, really appreciate you having me on, Neil. We'll definitely have to do this again soon.
Absolutely. And I'm going to keep going, guys. So I will talk more in depth about defensive kickers. But I really appreciate you joining me for this one, DK. I am still streaming to your channel. Are you okay with that? I don't know if there's okay. Totally yeah. Well, I'll talk so much shit about you after you leave. Yep. No. Thank you for joining me, DK. I'll go another 15, 20 minutes. But you go do what you need to do.
Cool. See ya.
All right. Later, DK. All right. So moving on to, I don't have a ton of interest in Daniel Bellinger. Again, just another one of those. He's a backup tight end. Could score a touchdown. He's cheap. If he does score a touchdown, you'll probably want to have him. But I think I like him pretty similar. Maybe even a little bit less. I think I like Schoonmaker actually a little bit better. Schoonmaker runs more routes. So if I'm breaking a tie between the backup tight ends, for me it would be Schoonmaker as my favorite. But both are just like real dart throws that I'm not really probably don't play either of them much tonight. Maybe they make it in a little bit in the optimos, but definitely not targets for me. We were asked about Aubrey. I think Aubrey, you can see projection of 9.4. That is a mega projection for a kicker. He has been absolutely crushing all year. He's going to get ownership though. So as a result of how well he's done, 19% projected ownership on Aubrey. That's actually not that bad. He's 5,000. So that's pretty expensive for a kicker. Not going to be a big priority for me. I know that he is somebody that I've heard throughout the day. I've talked with people who are running sims. Sounds like he's showing up in sims a lot. So probably he should be a bigger priority for me than he is. Probably being the fish who just like goes to the players that I want to do well, which is receivers and running backs and stuff. I think he's a strong play. He's been absolutely crushing all year, averaging like 15 fantasy points per game or something so far this year. Obviously a strong play. I'm hoping that we get a little bit of a different game script because I think the ownership might be pretty high for Brandon Aubrey. But yeah, I think the ownership is going to be there. I think he's a totally fine play. Usually you get kickers going a little bit under-owned. I don't know if that's going to be the case this year with how well Aubrey projects. And then you also have Greg Joseph is 4,400, so a little bit cheaper there. Coming in a little bit lesser ownership. I don't know. I don't know if I prefer Greg. I think I probably still just prefer Aubrey because I expect Dallas to put up more points. But I think both are totally fine plays. Honestly, it's hard to really give much analysis here because it all comes down to who gets the opportunities at kicker. But Aubrey has been, I mean, Dallas probably going to have more opportunities because they're going to be able to move the ball a little bit easier than the Giants would be my assumption. Yeah, I don't have a strong read on what to do with the kickers. I think both are very much in play. Not going to be. I'm probably going to try to match the field essentially 15 to 20% of the kickers. The defenses. Let's take a look at the ownership here. So we have the Cowboys coming in at 21% projected ownership. The Giants coming in at 15% projected ownership. I do kind of like the Giants defense at 3,600. I think that would be, if I'm taking a stand on any defense or kicker, probably the Giants defense would be the most interesting to me. They are very, very strong up front. So I think they could just, lead to some sacks. I don't know. I don't have a strong. They're low projected ownership. I think that they have a strong defensive line. So I would, if I'm breaking a tie, the cheap and unowned Giants defense is one that I have some interest in. All right, let's see. So that is defenses and kickers for you. Move on to the playing with some lineups. Actually, before we do that, I know people always want me to talk a little bit about FanDuel, so I will do that just briefly here. Pull up the FanDuel stuff. FanDuel slate, see what the prices are. See if anything's different on FanDuel. All right, so starting with MVP, you often get interesting. So you often do get like major chalk at MVP on FanDuel because there is no price multiplier. So you need the highest scoring player to be in your captain spot. The highest scoring player in your lineup needs to be in the captain spot on FanDuel, which tends to lead to condensed ownership there. Usually to quarterbacks, it's whoever projects the best on the slate. It is flat enough here that I'm fine eating some ownership on Dak and CD. Just 24% going to Dak, 18% to CD. I think those numbers are pretty fine. 16% on Daniel Jones. Honestly, I think I'd rather go to CD or Dak Prescott with the ownership being this close. If it does come in this close, I would prefer just the better plays. Malik Neighbors, I have a lot of interest in that. 10% Malik Neighbors at MVP on FanDuel. I think the running backs are pretty good bets. Devin Singletary, 7% projected ownership. Cowboys defense struggling against the run. I think this ownership number probably right. He's only 12,000, so I think people will be less inclined to put him into the MVP spot if they can pay for a more expensive guy there. So I do like Devin Singletary at reduced ownership. Rico Dowdle, 3.5%. I think that's a pretty strong play if you want to lean into the potential that Rico Dowdle does take on a bigger role this year. I like the idea of going to some Dowdle at MVP on FanDuel. Maybe a little bit of Wando Robinson. It's not PPR on FanDuel, so that's not quite as strong of a play, but still could get there. Ferguson 3% seems fine. Honestly, going to 3% Cowboys defense on FanDuel, I think I like that a little bit better, probably on FanDuel than DraftKings. I think that's about it. You could go to like a Brandon Cooks and hope that he just has a 110-yard game with a touchdown, and that's enough to be the highest scoring player on the slate, but typically not going quite as far down the line at MVP on FanDuel. As far as flex options go, chalk is kind of who you'd expect it to be. I think they're all pretty strong chalk. Hard to argue with any of these chalkier options. Daniel Jones, only 1,300, so 38% ownership makes sense there. A little bit light on Dak and CD. Neighbors at 32.5 seems fine. Dowdle at 24. Actually, Singletary at 30. I think I actually like that even better than Dowdle at 24, but Dowdle's only 8,000. So both pretty strong plays there. If you want to lean into running backs on FanDuel, I think that makes some sense. Ferguson, that's a good number on Ferguson, just at 21% ownership at 9.5K. This is too much ownership to me for Zeke. I think I would probably full fade Zeke on FanDuel, 11,500, 17% projected ownership. I don't think he's going to do much other than score touchdowns. I think that's where the majority of his fantasy points will come from. And this kind of price tag with that ownership, I think that would probably just be a fade for me. I like Slayton at 9% projected ownership at 7,500. I actually like that quite a bit. Slayton, that stands out to me as a play to lean into on FanDuel. Tolbert to a somewhat lesser extent, but he's also 8,000, just 13% projected ownership. That seems pretty strong. Theo Johnson is 6,000 min price, I believe, for Showdown on FanDuel. 8% projected ownership. I like that play quite a bit. Tracy seems fine. Hyatt, again, he's one play. You're counting on him making one long catch for large field GPPs only. I think 5,500 Jalen Hyatt at 2% ownership is actually a really strong play, because if he does have one catch for 60 yards on FanDuel, that is going to be enough to make the winning lineup for sure. I mean, it probably would be on DraftKings too, but 2% projected ownership for Jalen Hyatt on a site that is half PPR, so you don't lose as much for the fact that he doesn't actually get targeted a ton. I think that's a really, really strong number on Jalen Hyatt at 5,500. So I like that as a play quite a bit. All right, and that just went out. So I'm gonna move back to DraftKings, and actually I'll pull up DraftKings, make some lineups here, play around a bit, and take any questions you have as well. All right. This is just a random contest. I'm not actually even entering these lineups. So I'm building here for the large field GPPs that I tend to play. Man, we are dealing with so many bots tonight. Oh, and that one's on DKs, so I can't actually do anything about it. Tet asked, what's the situation with Elliott? Yeah, I went over it a little bit earlier. He didn't play much last week. McCarthy came out and said that was a product of the game environment where they were playing from behind for most of the game. So starting like the third quarter, they were going to hurry up offenses, and Zeke was just not part of that game plan. Zeke would look better in a game plan where they're playing from ahead, probably a little bit more likely to get more run. I think he's trusted to hold on to the ball. So I think in a game that the Cowboys play from ahead, I think we're more likely to see a little bit more of Zeke than in games where they're playing from behind and they need to get guys in there who can be part of a hurry-up offense. All right. I think I talked about Aubrey's ownership at flex and captain. It was like 20% at flex. I guess I could look up captain. All right, let's see. Baldy, I might take you up on that. Probably not right now, but we should talk about help with the bots, because I could use some help with the bots. I can look up the ownership real quick on Aubrey in the captain spot, though. We have Aubrey at 2% projected ownership. So that's a totally fair number for a guy who's put up 15 fantasy points on average so far this year. Pretty strong play. Well, my one hesitation with, if you play some Aubrey at captain, I probably wouldn't use the full salary cap. If you care about avoiding dupes, I care about avoiding dupes. I would leave a little bit of salary on the table, because everybody who uses Aubrey in the captain spot is going to be doing so as a way to get to all of the studs throughout the rest of their lineup. So you're going to run into a lot of dupes if you play Aubrey at captain and also play all studs in your lineup. Use the full salary cap. So I typically try not to use the entire salary cap if you do play a kicker at captain. All right, let's play around with some lineups. And, I talked about it earlier, liking the idea of playing some Daniel Jones at captain and going full onslaught with the Giants. So let's just see what that would look like. Jones, Neighbors, throw in Wandale, and then I think you go with one of Slayton or Theo Johnson. Let's try a Theo Johnson lineup. So you have 8,950 left over. Now here's one where you could go to, and I'm a fan of Ferguson. And then you have enough left to put Dak in there. So there's 500 left over. I think that lineup makes some sense. You got Dak stacked with Ferguson. You got the full-on Giants onslaught. I wouldn't expect this to be extremely duped. Maybe it will be. It's only leaving 500 on the table, and it's there's nothing super unique about the construction, but a little bit of a Dallas onslaught. So I think it could potentially avoid some of the most duped lineups. At least not get duped a million times. Maybe throw a Singletary in here. Now you got the full-on Giants onslaught, leaving 2,700 on the table. This one I'm pretty confident will be significantly less duped. So this I think makes some sense as a large field GPP lineup. Seems counterintuitive to have Jones at the captain spot with 3 pass catchers and then Devin Singletary. But Singletary, 10 targets on the year so far, not a complete zero in the passing game. Certainly capable of scoring or scoring a touchdown through the air, or just having enough targets or enough catches to get some PPR points there. So I think it's a little bit counterintuitive, but not the worst possible lineup you could build. Let's see, what else? What else could we do here? Maybe the same thing with Dak. I kind of want to see if that's even plausible. With Dak at captain, if you put CD in there, because it'd be hard to build without CD, can you get cheap enough to make it work? I want to see whether it would be possible. I mean, there are ways to make it work, of course, but I want to see the best type of lineup I could build here. So now I think go Tolbert, 5,800, save a little bit of salary. Could I put Ferguson in here? Go with Lamb, Ferguson, and Tolbert. 4,900 left over, so 9,800 total with 2 spots left. I think this is one where you could go with the Cowboys defense. Just hope that it's a full-on onslaught. And then from the Giants, I mean, you could go with Giants defense. I've talked about not hating the idea of just saying, what if that offense just can't do anything? And it's just the defense has a couple takeaways and 3 sacks, and it's actually the optimal play from the Giants. I don't hate the idea of doing something like this, leaving 800 on the table. You don't have any position players from the Giants at all. You're just betting on the Giants offense cannot move against the Cowboys at all. I kind of like the idea of that type of lineup sometimes. You could also leave a little bit more salary on the table and say, what if it is Darius Slayton? Maybe Darius Slayton outscores the Giants defense. You're leaving 1,200 on the table. He could score the 1 touchdown for the Giants, have 6 receptions for 100 yards. I don't know. Just that's probably unlikely given he has 10 targets on the year so far or something like that. But I think there are ways for Slayton to get there. So these are the types of lineups that I like to do. The full-on onslaught. This might be more duped than I want it to be. This would probably be at least less duped than if you made the switch from Tolbert up to Cooks. And so that's where a lot of people, I think, would build like this. And if you did build like this at first, I think that is where it makes a lot of sense to just say, I'm just going to swap out Cooks for Tolbert because they're the same play. Essentially, like both have about the same usage. And Tolbert is $1,000 cheaper. So less people will get to this lineup because it leaves 1,200 on the table. So that to me would be a GPP pivot. Man, we are still getting these bots. And there's nothing I can do about it. If you're on my channel, you can't see the bots anyway. I just see them in StreamYard, and it makes it tougher for me to see everybody else's comments. Yeah, Barfly says RB9, I believe, for Aubrey. If Brandon Aubrey were a running back, he would be something like the RB9 on the year. That's how many fantasy points he has scored, which is kind of insane. Is it okay to have Dak and CD as the only 2 Cowboys? Definitely. I think that is absolutely fine. I mean, Dak could just feed it to CD all game. They could crush this Giant secondary and not really need to go anywhere else. So I think that's totally fine for those 2 to be your only 2 Cowboys. I don't think Wan'Dale at captain is crazy. Again, he had 11 targets in a game. I think if you just throw in a touchdown or 2 to his usual, just like PPR scam artistry, suddenly he could put up a really big score or could get to 100 yards. Like so far, he hasn't really got a lot of yards. He's got a lot of receptions for very few yards, but he's certainly capable of just breaking one off, having one of those short receptions and then taking off down the field, having a broken play. He's just as capable of anybody of taking advantage of a broken play, getting a touchdown. So yeah, I think Wan'Dale Robinson, I think has enough upside to be the captain. So I don't hate that idea. Just scrolling through comments a little bit. Waylon, any props I like tonight? So I don't do a lot of looking at props. I'm mostly playing DFS. I meant to ask DK that, sorry. So somebody asked for it earlier, and DK is definitely better than I am with the props. He plays a lot of props. It's not something I do a ton of. I do like pick 6 occasionally, and I don't even look at tools most of the time. I just kind of go, all right, I just correlate essentially when I'm playing pick six. So I don't really have a strong feel for the props on, regular sports books, if that's what you're looking for. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any props that I have seen talked about that I would like. I like the idea of playing. If you play somewhere that you can correlate, that's kind of a big thing for me. Just correlate like Dak and CD overs or unders if you prefer, and then correlate against their teammates. But this is not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. All right. I don't think Elliott. I mean, maybe if he scores a couple touchdowns, he could get there. But man, I don't love the idea of Elliott captain. He would not be one of my first 10 potential captains. So I would not recommend it. I think you can see it. Yeah, you can see it on bbmdb.com if you want to see the BBM Millie board. That's the only one you can see it on, but on bbmdb.com you can see the best ball leaderboard. All right. Okay, let's see. Crutches says tailed Nez on a fun underdog one, Tolbert alt over 69.5 and Tracy over 29.5. So there you go. A couple sharp guys doing that one. If you want a 45x or something, there's a good one for you. I like that. To be contrarian, I try to leave at least like 800. And that's generally the more you leave on the table, the more contrarian you're going to be. Or the less likely you are to be duped, at least. I know Cody Main did some good research on like the chart, and it is like, there comes a certain number, I forget, it's around 600, 800, where you really start dropping off the dupes. Like when you're using close to the full salary, you're just going to be duped a lot. But there comes a point where it's just like you start dropping off, but it's just like the more you leave, the fewer dupes you get. So I would typically recommend leaving at least 800 if you really want to avoid most of the duped lineups. You still can run into some highly duped lineups at that point, but in general, I'd say at least like 800 or so is a good starting place. No great warm-up news today. The only news we got was Darius Slayton inactive. Unless somebody in chat has anything you want to share about warm-up news. Okay, Crutches says 49,500. Yep, that sounds about right. When you start dropping off, appreciate this. Anthony, send me a super chat. I did just get my super chats going again, so appreciate you sending it. Favorite MVP for FanDuel, favorite low-owned DK captain, and how much money do you leave on the table for both? For FanDuel, we just talked about DK. For FanDuel, I leave at least 1,500 in general. I used to do even more. I've cut back a little bit because the losing streaks can be quite a lot if you do consistently leave 1,800 on DK and 3,000 on FanDuel like I used to. So I've cut back, but I'd still say at least 1,500 on FanDuel, where it's $500 increments is a good place to start. Favorite MVP on FanDuel. Let me look again. Actually, I think you asked about DraftKings as well. Let me double check this. Favorite low-owned DraftKings captain. So I'll start there. Favorite low-owned DraftKings captain. Kind of depends how you defined low-owned. I'm going to assume that everybody Singletary and up is not in play for low-owned. That's tough. That is a tough favorite play. Ferguson at 5.5% feels pretty nice. If I could go to Singletary, I think Singletary at 8% is a pretty strong bet against a bad Cowboys run defense. And then on FanDuel, we had some nice options on FanDuel at MVP. I mean, I think you'd be fine just leaning into CD. I think CD is a really strong MVP option on FanDuel. But if you want to get more contrarian, honestly, maybe Ferguson again. I really like that 3% projected ownership on Ferguson on FanDuel. But yeah, I don't get as weird at MVP on FanDuel because there is no salary multiplier. Dowdle, I think, is a strong bet on FanDuel, but I'd probably go, if I have to choose one, I'll go Dowdle. I'll go Dowdle over Ferguson on FanDuel and just hope that he does have the bigger role. Wish cast my way into that bigger role for Dowdle. All right, let's see. No, Slayton is in. Was there any? Do you just send me money and no question? Appreciate you, Baldy in the off. Sends us great news nuggets and also sending money. Appreciate you. Unless I missed the no, just send money. Yeah, appreciate it. If you had any other questions, I would take them. All right, let's see. Greg, Joseph, or Slayton. Probably Greg Joseph if I had to choose one. Thoughts on the Diggs versus Neighbors matchup tonight? I'm not really concerned about Diggs. I don't think that he's like an elite cover cornerback. He goes for interceptions, and sometimes that can lead to like long plays, can lead to big plays. So I'm not overly concerned about Diggs versus Malik Neighbors. I don't think he's on the same. He's not like the Patrick Surtain level of cover cornerback. So not really concerned about the Trevon Diggs matchup. Lupke, so I haven't made my lineup yet. I'm about to do that. Good reminder that I need to get out of here pretty soon. But I think I'll end up with probably 8 to 10% Lupke, like nothing too crazy. I'll be above the field there, but only 3 targets last game on 14 routes run. It's not like he has an amazing usage there. So it's really a long shot play, not coming in at like 0 ownership. So I think like 8 to 10% probably is where I end up on Lupke, or at least that's my target. All right, let's see. Agree with this. JM says Singletary seems like a smash given how bad Dallas is against the run through 3 weeks, but that also feels like a big trap where Dallas overcompensates to stop the run. Yeah, and they keep on talking about. Oh no, sorry, Singletary. Could be. I also think that they're better than they have been. Maybe I'm wrong, but I keep on expecting them to be better. I don't know, but I agree with you. It feels like a trap. I'll still play a good amount. I don't know if I'll be underweight to the field there. Marco, appreciate you as well. Super sticker. What is a super sticker? I can't see a sticker here or anything, but I appreciate you sending it. I don't know. Maybe that's just on my screen. I can't see what the sticker is supposed to be, but appreciate it. I'm not playing Zeke Captain is my thoughts on Zeke Captain. That's just going to skip past it. I don't think that he has enough upside to get there. He could score a couple touchdowns and bury me, but if he buries me, he buries me. I think that would be a play. Like I don't actively X people out in general, but he's definitely not a priority for me. Not somebody I'm trying to get to at captain. All right. I think I need to. Yeah, it's an NFT. Maybe that's exactly what it is. It's a invisible rock NFT. That's why I couldn't see it. I need to get out of here and make my lineups. Appreciate all of you hanging out with me. If you have not already done so, please do subscribe to the channel. Trying to get to 3,000 in the short term. Hopefully next week. Next week, the goal is 3,000. 5,000 by the end of the NFL season is the ultimate goal. So if you would subscribe, I would appreciate that. Of course, appreciate all of the comments throughout. If you like the video, that's always helpful. And of course, we are also on DK's channel. If you want more of DK's content, you can find the link is in the description of my video in the Flannelverse. So you can go find that there. Go check that out if you have not already done so. All right. Appreciate you guys. Let's win some money tonight. Good luck.